Folks, we'll go ahead and get started. Since we've got some new faces tonight, I should introduce myself. I'm Billy Heron. I work here at the Crane Trust, but I also work for Conservation Nebraska. So this is also going to be on Zoom with Conservation Nebraska tonight. Our speakers tonight are Todd Boller. And if I kill your last name, you know, it's the way it goes.
You got it.
And Rob Shultz. Todd, right now, is past president of the Weed Control Association, and he is out of Fillmore County. And Rob is with our Hall County. He's our Hall County Weed Superintendent for 23 years. He's with Howard for 10. So these gentlemen are going to be pretty knowledgeable. And a funny story, I told them about the Christmas tree that the Crane Trust and Conservation Nebraska is having now, the Stir Museum, and we went out and we cut all these weeds down and we got them all shellacked and everything. And probably 4 of those plants are going to be on that Christmas tree that he's going to be talking about tonight. So I have learned about my noxious weeds already. So with that, I'll turn it over to the gentleman.
Thank you. And we'd like to thank Billy and the Crane Trust here for having us out here to talk about noxious and invasive weeds for this year. We'll move this up a little higher for us. Okay, hopefully that helped just a little bit. We're just going to go through some where we come from with noxious weeds, where we are right now, and where we're going to be going in the future. So let's just get started. I got a lot of slides to go through here, and then Todd's got some things to go through also. So anyway, you know, back in 1873, you know, there was a criminal act. Landowner must control Canada thistle by cutting or mowing to prevent seeds from ripening. So Canada thistle has been around a long time here in Nebraska. And way back then, any person may enter another person's land for the purpose of control or cutting, mowing Canada thistle, and shall not be sued in an action of trespass. So you could go onto somebody else's land and cut their Canada thistle. So moving ahead just a little bit into the 20s, Canada thistle laws and fines are the same as 1873. Metropolitan cities must control all weeds or worthless vegetation. Enforcement is by special assessment. So there's quite a few things going on, you know, in weed control. So in 37, we had weed eradication districts. They were established. Noxious weeds were designated. So back then we had bindweed, puncture vine, and Canada thistle as noxious weeds. And so a bindweed control fund was used by the State Department of Agriculture, and inspection was established. So let's see here. Bindweed, puncture vine, leafy spurge, Canada thistle, perennial peppergrass, Russian knapweed, Johnson grass, and musk thistle have been designated as noxious weeds. So this is in the 60s. We had quite a few noxious weeds being established there. So any district may, this is in the early 60s, any district may employ a field superintendent and purchase equipment. Any unpaid control bills are to be assessed to the property. And any control work performed by the weed district must be less than commercial rates. Oh, must not be. That's right. You're right. Must not be. We cannot be public versus private, and so we have to be a shade bit higher than the commercial applicators. So, you know, the fines are a minimum of $10 to a maximum of $500. This is in the early 60s now. So moving ahead into the mid 60s, you know, there was a new act based on a model law written by NASDA and with advice provided from weed scientists from the USDA, Weed Science Society of America, to overhaul the Nebraska noxious weed laws. So it is the original version of today's noxious weed law in Nebraska. It's when we started becoming effective as noxious weeds. So landowners are ultimately responsible for the control of noxious weeds, and that's the way it is today, but this is landowner's responsibility. Weed control authorities are authorized to use or authorized to force control noxious weeds and may file a tax lien for reimbursement of expenses. And we can still do that in today's noxious weed law. I did some force control work, and I know Todd has too. And if they don't pay their bill within 60 days, we can assess it to the against their taxes at the treasurer's office. And we have done that this year. The Department of Agriculture may force control individual landowners should the county authorities fail or refuse to enforce the law. So the Department of Ag could actually do that also. County weed superintendents are required to inspect and report all noxious weeds within their district, enforce compliance, file reports, and provide noxious weed advice to landowners, kind of about what we do today. County control authority is required to provide for a coordinated noxious weed program, material equipment and materials as needed, and employ a weed superintendent. So back in the mid-60s, we had 12 noxious weeds designated by statute. Bindweed, puncture vine, leafy spurge, Canada thistle, perennial peppergrass, Russian knapweed, Johnson grass, musk thistle, Scotch thistle, morning glory, fur ragweed, local laudatory cress. So those are some of the different species than we have today. So duties of the Weed Control Authority. The elections of control authorities are further defined. County designated weeds are allowed, and state costs may be recovered by suit initiated by the Attorney General against the landowner. So there's a lot of things happening in the 60s now. County weed superintendent must be certified. Weed superintendent must be bonded. Notices are defined. So debts owed to the weed control authority may be recovered by special assessment for suit filed against the landowner. So now we're getting into the 70s. So the word eradication is removed from the noxious weed law. 12 noxious weeds are removed from state statutes, and now they're to be designated by the director. So back in the early 70s, or mid 70s now, this is where our noxious weed list is starting. So musk thistle, Canada thistle, plumeless thistle, and leafy spurge. Those were the first 4 noxious weeds that we had.
So they took away the 12 and just limited.
And now we're down limited to 4 now. Yes.
Is the director statewide or county or?
The director is the director of agriculture. So now it says all counties are required to have a weed superintendent, and that's as today also. Each county weed superintendent must be annually certified by the director of agriculture.
And that's what you are? Yes.
I'm the weed superintendents of the county. Yes. So now we're moving up to the 80s. So the department actually had their budget reduced quite substantially, and the noxious weed budget is eliminated. Noxious weed budget is eliminated at the Department of Agriculture. So this is when some of the weed superintendents and a group of folks got together and went and lobbied in Lincoln and got the noxious weed program started back up in the Department of Ag. All enforcement is vested to the control authority, including rules and regs, investigations, and notices. So the county weed superintendent is required to have 20 continuing education hours annually. It's to be sponsored by their state association or government association. And each superintendent must be certified by the EPA. So we have to be commercially certified to spray. And we have to have continuing education hours every year. In 1989, so it was passed over the governor's veto on May 24th, 89, effective November 1, 1989. The need for the act is redefined. Noxious weeds were designated by the Director of Agriculture. So this one we're getting our weed law back up par here. The act requires specific actions from and responsibilities by landowners, county weed superintendents, county weed boards, county commissioners or supervisors, county attorneys, state attorney general, the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. So they all got their own duties, what they need to do. And I think I might touch on that here just in a little bit. Action against the county weed control authority or failure or refusal to implement a program is defined. So if we don't carry out our control program within our county, the NDA has things to say about that. The fine for non-compliance by landowners is raised to $100 a day to a maximum of $1,500. So we have force control notices, or we have a 15-day, could be a fine notice up to $1,500. And that one would go to court through the court system. Otherwise, we can do a force control. It's a 10-day force control notice. And if they don't control their noxious weeds in the first 10 days, we can go out and we can spray it or have somebody spray it after day 10. So just a few things along the way in the 90s to as they added a few more cleanup things to the noxious weed law. Give county board the authority to fund the county noxious weed program from the county general fund. So in 2004, the second one, the director may temporarily designate a weed as noxious for 18 months. And so we have used that a couple of times over the past 10, 15 years. We can declare an emergency designation for a weed and for 18 months, and then get the rules and regs all up to par, and then it can become a noxious weed after those 18 months. The director may apply and accept funds for noxious weed control. Creates noxious weed and invasive plant assistance fund. And those couple of bullet points have to do with kind of our grant situation and some funds from the state of Nebraska that we've been receiving over the past 13 years. So project is controlled without individual notice. We do spraying on the river or a project area. All this does is we can advertise in the newspaper for consecutive weeks, once a week for 4 weeks. And if we have a out-of-state landowner that we can't get a hold of or something like that, it still gives us the authority to go through and spray a particular noxious weed or something on that person's property. So it's just
he gets charged for it.
no, not normally. No, not in particular situations. So this is just the one that I run here in Hall County. It's this official notice, goes in the newspaper for consecutive weeks. So in 2007, they created a Riparian Vegetation Management Task Force and grant program. And so this was pretty big for our weed management areas in the state and control of invasive species on the rivers of Nebraska. They allocated $2 million a year for 2 years. and for invasive weed control in the river systems. And so that's when we started doing a lot of noxious and invasive weed spraying in the rivers of Nebraska. It was in 2007, 2008. So when it was all said and done, that $4 million was turned into over $8 million with matching funds. And so we took the state of Nebraska's $4 million and turned it into $8 million. And so that was a pretty good return on their money. It was all said and done. So it is the intent of the legislature to appropriate $1 million annually for the management of vegetation within the banks of the natural stream or within 100 feet of the banks of the channel of any natural stream. So this was LB 1038 in 2016. And so there's some figures what we had been using. In 16, we used 668,000, and then budget cuts came into effect. And so we got down to $465,000 for those few years. 2021 was $706,000. This year, next few years is right at $706,000 is what we're going to be getting from the state for vegetation control in rivers and streams in Nebraska. So the Noxious Weed Control Act is what we, Todd and I, and the county weed superintendents, we follow. So it's the duty of each person who owns, controls land, effectively control noxious weeds on such land. County boards or control authorities are responsible for administration of the noxious weed control laws at the county level. So how many noxious weeds are there in the state of Nebraska currently, as of right now? Any guesses? Bullhard.
12.
13. I heard it 12. 12 is it. They're listed. Canada thistle, musk thistle, leafy spurge, plumeless thistle. Those were some of our first ones. Plumeless thistle, spotted knapweed, diffuse knapweed. So purple loosestrife, it's kind of a wetland weed. We've been fighting since 2001 along the Platte River here and other water areas.
And people plant that in their gardens for decorative.
Yes, they did. Yep. And so that was kind of one of that and salt cedar also. That was one of the reasons for getting a noxious weed, get it out of the sale at nurseries. So
What's salt cedar?
it is, I'll have a picture of it here, just a little bit. And a lot of it's kind of found more out west. There wasn't big infestations around Lake McConaughey, Harlem Reservoir. There's still some out on the Platte River out west.
Pronounce the last one.
Sericea lespedeza.
That's fun to say.
Fragmites, Japanese knotweed, giant knotweed, and Sericea lespedeza. So the captions up top taking out the name, but this is Canada thistle, grows in circular patches by underground roots and rhizomes. We find it in roadsides, pasture situations, CRP areas, type of thing.
Are those the small heads on those?
Yes, they are pretty small, and it only gets maybe knee high or so.
Is the landowner responsible for the road ditches then?
County usually takes over those and does the noxious weed control in them.
Some of the smaller counties, they'll have the landowner do it because they don't put into their weed program as much. But most of them, county weed superintendent will take care of them. And you might just have to let them know.
This is the one I know, and it's a beautiful flower. But
But it spreads rapidly. Yes, it does. It does spread and gets very thick. And so musk thistle has been around a long time, but Leafy Spurge grows about knee high, white milky sap inside, grows in circular patches also.
Which thistle does the regal fritillary butterfly require?
That would be one of the natives tall thistle.
So it's not one of these.
No.
No, the tall thistle is a native thistle.
Oh.
Blueless thistle. Spotted knapweed and diffused knapweed. I haven't been kind of telling what parts of the state. This spotted and diffused knapweed are kind of maybe in the northeast part of the state. For blue stripes, found across the state, basically in wetland areas, a lot of in the river situation around here, we're dealing with it.
And is this the one that when you go for a drive and you see a whole field that is covered with purple? Is it this one?
No, like in the early spring, that could be like out in a bean stubble field. It
Yeah.
could be henbit, right? It only gets about this tall.
Oh, yeah, it is hen
That's
bed.
called henbit.
Hen bit, is
Yeah.
that on your list?
No, that's not enough.
It's fine. Okay.
Here's salt cedar. Pinkish flower, and that was sold in the nurseries also as an ornamental tree. It blooms pink in the summertime. Kind of a pretty tree, I guess. So it blooms, but other than that, it's not the most appealing thing. It does soak up a lot of water, drinks a lot of water. Yep. There's Fragmites that we've been putting a lot of money towards over the past 15 years. Very aggressive weed, sends out runners and sets new rhizomes down, chokes out waterways. I'll have some more photos probably as we go along here.
So where did that one come from?
Oh, come from.
It was used as bank stabilization along some canals out west, I believe, and then it's just, I mean, it's from one end of the country to the other now, so.
The Gilbert, eastern part of the country has a lot of it.
Is there only a certain time you can spray it to kill it?
You can, the best time is in the fall, but you can spray it spring, summer, and fall to keep it in check. Japanese knotweed and Japanese and giant knotweed. These are ones that we jumped on early here in the state of Nebraska. We only have maybe 10 acres or less of it around, but it is a very aggressive weed. In other states, they're having problems with it. And so we did a weed risk assessment on this particular weed, showed that it was very aggressive and it was time. So we went ahead and declared them a noxious weed. And so we can, and a lot of it's found around Omaha and the Lincoln area. And so I did have one patch of it on Alva. It was on Alva Road down here, south towards the county line. One guy called me up one day and says, "I think you got some knotweed down here." So I went, sure enough, it was, and I got it eradicated. So out in the middle of nowhere, you wonder how it got there, but it was there. So they sure could have, but another picture, of big heart-shaped leaf on this giant knotweed. And Cerisa lesmedisa, that's used even down south as a legume, and so they're having big problems with it in Kansas, and so we declared it a noxious weed, and they're doing a lot of work of it. It's in kind of southern tier Nebraska, southeast Nebraska, and moving up from Kansas. So what just is a noxious or invasive plant? An alien species whose introduction does or likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. Basically, it's just a plant growing where you don't want it. So a native in one state could be an invasive in another state. And a plant meeting 6 out of the 9 criteria will be considered as having met the minimum standard to justify a recommendation to the director of the NDA as a plant as a noxious weed. So there is a criteria that it does have to meet in order to become a noxious weed. We just can't pull a weed up and say, oh, we want that to be a noxious weed. No, it has to meet 6 out of the 9 criteria. So it poses a threat to Nebraska's economy or the environment, social welfare, wildlife, or safety.
Poison ivy on there.
Well, it may not meet as many of the requirements as that it needs to.
Because I bet it doesn't need great.
The plant reproduces and disseminates rapidly. Plant is not native to Nebraska, so we get questions about certain weeds here in Nebraska to be a noxious weed. Well, you might say, like you said, tall thistle. Well, that's a native, so it can't be a noxious weed. At least 2 bordering states have designated the plant as noxious. And the plant has a documented history of causing considerable difficulties in those states. Infestations of the plant within Nebraska have been properly surveyed and documented by the Noxious Weed Program staff. The NDA has reviewed and researched published literature concerning the plant. At least 5% of the Nebraska counties favor the designation, so the counties have to be surveyed.
But
And
not
they-
very many of them have to favor it,
All right, only 5%.
which is like, what, 5 counties or 6?
Yeah, not very many.
6.
So then the NWCA, our Weed Control Association, has recommended to the director that the plant be designated as noxious. And the Noxious Weed Advisory Committee has recommended that it be designated noxious. So there's steps that it has to go through to become a noxious weed. So we run like the Japanese and giant knotweed and Cerisa lespedeza, they go through a weed risk assessment, and provides us information about that particular weed, feasibility of eradication, potential to spread, economic impact, and various things. So we'll skim through these probably pretty quick here, but duties of the folks involved controlling these noxious weeds here in the state of Nebraska. The landowner, you got the county and the state. So, if you're a landowner, why should you really care about noxious weeds? Should be a concern to everybody. Every farmer, rancher, landowner, they reduce the yields in crops, pastures, and reduce the value of the land. And this photo here, completely yellow. That was in North Dakota a number of years when I went up to do some biocontrol sweeping for some bugs and brought them back.
Leafy Spurge.
That is Leafy Spurge. Yep. I didn't think there was much of a problem up there until, we got up and over the hill and it's like, ooh, that's a big problem. They actually did not graze some of these fields for years because Leafy Spurge was so heavily infested.
So cattle won't eat it, or
They won't. No,
it's
they won't.
harmful to them.
Well, not really harmful. They just won't eat it.
They won't eat it.
The sap can cause blindness if it gets into their eyes.
They use goats too.
Yes, goats are a good tool for controlling leafy spurge, trying to keep them confined in that particular area to weed it down. Yep. Controlling noxious weeds is a state law. Farmers, ranchers, landowners need to act early to prevent the spread of noxious weeds. In the long run, early detection, fast treatment programs can save you a lot of money. County's duties and responsibilities. So it's county's responsibility to employ a weed superintendent administer the Noxious Weed Control Act, establish a program for the control of the noxious weeds, provide a public hearing for dissatisfied landowners who questions the existence of uncontrolled noxious weeds, issuing notices to landowners, 10 and 15-day notices. Got to notify the county attorney when a landowner fails to take action in controlling noxious weeds on a specific property. I do work with the county attorney, just letting them know what's going on. And I know, Todd does too, and weed superintendents need to work with their county attorneys.
Like in a given year, how many people would you turn in to the, like a suit to the county attorney?
Oh, it just varies. Just some seasons it might be one, some seasons might be 5, depending on
So it is.
their
it isn't
history.
a humongous number.
No, it can be, but somewhere, a lot of counties do 1 to 5,
So
depending
how
on
do
the
you
year.
find that these noxious weeds are out there? Do you drive around looking for them? Does the landowner recognize them, or a little bit of both, or?
We do a lot of inspections, do a lot of
So you
driving
just drive
around.
around and if you see,
Yep, and we
Because-
write up inspection
because
notices.
some landowners might not recognize, or maybe they do by now.
Well, it's, education to the landowner, if we find some Fragmites on their property. A lot of folks probably maybe don't know what Fragmites is right now, and so, we'll stop in and talk to them about it and educate them. And then, if they don't do something down the road, a few years, down the road, we can go on further with some other notices or actions.
And with the Noxious Weed Control Act, it actually requires us to check all lands within our counties.
So
So
you go up and down driving like the gravel roads and stuff?
Gravel roads.
gravel
whatever
roads,
lanes
we do a lot of walking, in areas you can't drive. So, and then now hopefully drones can be a tool too, so.
And we get complaints and called into the office, so we'll go check them out. The Department of Agriculture does random inspections on our counties. And so we'll get inspection reports from them also, from the field staff of the Department of Ag.
When you said we get complaints, that like a neighbor will call
Yeah.
and say, I've seen some this on my neighbor's land and they're
Yeah.
not doing anything about it.
And go out and inspect it and see. Because a lot of times you can, before you even send anything out, you need to go identify what it is. And so, you might get a complaint, oh, this guy has a lot of thistles out there. Well, I'll back up for a minute. I got a call a year ago about a lot of thistles along the railroad track on a Game and Parks property. So I went out and checked it out. It was a field of tall thistle. Native plant, native thistle. It was probably about shoulder high and purple. There's nothing I can do about it. It was a native plant, not a noxious weed. So it was a great pollinator plot there. So yes, notify the county attorney, then we can cause notice to be filed with the Register of Deeds. And that's like after we do a forest control notice, we would go out and spray this particular infestation of a forest control, 10-day forest control. We would file that with the Register of Deeds for a possible unpaid weed control assessment on that property. And then after 60 days, the bill's not been paid, then we can go assess it against the land taxes at the treasurer's office. And so then when that landowner comes in to pay the bill, he has to pay the county treasurer because it's assessed against his taxes. So the county weed superintendent, just moving down, we have to be commercially certified. Handle noxious weed complaints, examine all lands for noxious and invasive species. Map the weed infestations, do follow-ups. We publish general project notices in the newspaper. Supervise and carry out our program. Attend continuing education. We work with various agencies, your NRD, cities, villages, DOT, railroads, in the irrigation district. So we work with all the agencies, in your particular county. Communicate with the county attorney, communicate with the county board, deal with the personnel, budget, roadside spraying, commercial spraying, weed ID, herbicide recommendations. We can do weed-free forage inspections or gravel pit inspections. We're certified to do that also. We help neighboring counties if they get a new weed superintendent, mentor them along, train them also, help them out in any way we can. More things that we do as a county weed superintendent. County attorney. Be familiar with the Noxious Weed Control Act. I go in and visit with the county attorney probably about once a year, just to keep up to date on things. Let them know what's going on or what might be going on this particular year, what we could do different. The state attorney general, filing of action against the control authority when they fail or refuse to comply with the instructions provided at the NDA. So if a county is not doing their particular job, the state attorney general can get involved and take the county further on to make them do what they need to do. Director of Agriculture, designated plants that are to be considered noxious, and which control measures to be used, oversee the Noxious Weed Advisory Committee. We have an invasive plant watch list. Todd will be talking about that here in just a little bit. So we've got some other weeds that we look for. Not only the noxious weeds, there's other weeds that are moving in or here. So we need to monitor those also.
The 12 that are designated now, are those all 12 non-native species?
Yes.
All right, they have to be.
Yes.
So like bindweed and puncture vine, those are taken out because we have them.
Yes.
They're
And part of the other reason those got taken off too is when 2,4-E came out, it controlled it at the time, so it was easy to control. And so that's another reason why that one came off, I believe.
And I know this probably isn't a noxious weed, but the cedars are taking over pastures. But I suppose that's a native,
It is a native
it's a
plant.
nuisance and not a noxious.
We get a lot of questions about the eastern red cedar. Yeah,
I mean, it's like harmful to
we do.
ranchers and their land. They're losing grassland because the cedars are taking over.
There's a lot of grassland to the eastern red cedar. Yep. Switching gears here just a little bit, weed management areas in the state of Nebraska were created to meet the growing need for large-scale noxious and invasive weed control. They allow numerous partners and agencies to pool their resources towards a common goal. And our first weed management area was formed in 1998. And since that time, 12 more additional weed management areas were formed. And so here's just a map of weed management areas here in the state of Nebraska, how they're divided up kind of into watershed areas. And so the pink one right through the central plat here is I'm involved in the Platte Valley Weed Management Area. And Todd is in the green one in the Twin Valley Weed Management Area. And so these were formed to bring in some other funding to fight specific invasive weeds or maybe even noxious weeds, but a lot of times it's invasive weeds. I know the one in the northwest part of the state, they've been fighting Houndstongue and yellow flag iris. And so and before Cerisa lespedeza became a noxious weed, the 5 rivers in the southeast part of the state, they were educating landowners on Cerisa lespedeza down in that particular part. And in the southwest weed management area and the Twin Valley weed management area, those all have to do with the Republican River. And you know about the issues in the Republican River over the past 15, 20 years. And so they've did tremendous amount of work down there. So I think I got a slide coming up that shows some figures. So
all right, explain like, let's go to northern Nebraska,
Uh-huh.
like Kip Brown Rock. You know, here, they're outlined in red with the group over there, but they're yellow over with the sand hills. What's the significance?
So some of those might have been started, the South Dakota, Nebraska Purple Loosestrife,
Oh, purple loose.
Purple Loosestrife project. They had a prison up there actually raising purple loosestrife biocontrol agents, bugs that eat purple loosestrife only. That's all they eat. And so some of those, yeah, that red kind of has to do maybe with that particular project. They were involved in that project.
With
also.
KBR is with sand hills.
Yes, yes. So that's kind of our, so yeah, we've been, you know, some of the areas, cattails, Russian olive, Houndstongue, Scotch thistle, eastern red cedar, sericea, yellow flag iris, Fragmites. Over 2,500 miles has been either treated or surveyed and repeated a lot. So how have these projects been funded? Well, the Environmental Trust, the Nebraska Legislature, Nebraska Department of Agriculture, NRCS, other federal grants, and other conservation groups, NRDs, various agencies also help assist in these projects. So dollars allocated, over $20 million, actual cash spent, and that does not include in-kind work also. So we're upwards of over $20 million being spent now on noxious and invasive weed control.
That doesn't count private landowners.
Right, exactly right. It does not. So the, you know, the challenge is the funding, new work needs to be done. Maintenance of previously treated areas, participation, and the landowners getting them to buy in on maintenance and perform some maintenance on their own. The partners keep building new partnerships, evaluate what's been done, monitor the previous work, and schedule some follow-up work, and landowners getting them involved. So this is, like I said, this is our weed management area. That's what I'm involved in, the Platte Valley Weed Management Area. And so Lincoln and Keith counties just joined us here a few years ago. So removal of vegetation, you know, we conserve water usage, increase water conveyance, and increase wildlife habitat. There's some Fragmites choke channels. They reduce the flow, conveyance, and the wildlife habitat. You know, the choked up channels increase the flooding potential, consuming valuable water. So some of our projects, non-native Fragmites on the Platte River, we use helicopter, airboat, and in the past year or so, we've been using a drone too to help do some spraying. He's been doing some pretty good work for us. We have a cost share program here in our weed management area. We give the landowners some herbicide to spray their invasive Fragmites or purple loosestrife, and they have to apply it, or we can have a contractor come in and apply it. They would pay for that. It's hard to see, but this is, we do some helicopter work twice a year through the Central Platte Valley here, and they give us shape files. And so these, the green ones are 2019 helicopter in the spring, and the red is in the fall. And so we haven't got, I don't think we've gotten their shape files from this fall yet, but we will be getting those. We can see exactly where they sprayed and what they've done. Little pictures might be a little hard for you to see, but you know, we've got some pictures from 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12. You know, that's when we started our control work was back in 2008. And so really opened up some of those channels for flow conveyance and sure decreased the flooding potential. That's what one of the channels looked like right there, was completely infested with Fragmites. Very aggressive plant. So we do a lot of education and outreach, you know, just like this particular presentation. We do some mailings, you know, work with another weed management area to produce a magazine called the Weed Watch. Get that out a couple times a year. Works out real well. So here's some Platte Valley Weed Management Area expenditures. I don't have anything for this year in there yet, but this was through last year. About $6.5 million spent. We applied herbicide on about 43,000 acres. Approximately 2,300 acres removed on 315 miles of river. And down at the bottom, we're pretty fortunate. We have a great coordinator. He also works for the Nature Conservancy. And so that helps us out. That gets about, you'd be able to use more of our money for projects. So we get about 92% of our money out on the ground. 2% in monitoring, 2% public outreach, and 3% with coordinator salary and 1% legal. So that's a great number.
When you said remove, is that that is no longer you?
No, like disking probably, you know, disking or shredding or something like that, you know, or removal. Disking. So here's just a few numbers on the Twin Valley Weed Management Area down on the Republican River. They spent about $5.3 million with a little over $2 million in dollars through 2020. So they've been doing a lot of work on the Republican River for basically flow conveyance and getting the water to Kansas.
Yep, we were sued by Kansas here a few years ago. You've probably seen that. And the whole goal was to get as much water down there. So it's been removing invasive vegetation and down trees, just clearing the water, let it flow.
So 2020 goals continue as no there, but continue maintenance on non-native Fragmites along the Platte tributaries, continue the cost share program, outreach and educational activities. You know, based on our previous expenditures and the work needed, it costs us about $450,000 to $650,000 a year just to maintain the flowing river channels and a few of the backwater channels. But we do go from Columbus to Lake McConaughey and a little bit beyond, so west end of Keith County. So we got a pretty good stretch to work with.
What kind of herbicides are you using?
Where we can use arsenal or habitat, if it's outside of irrigation season, that's where we'll use that particular herbicide, arsenal or habitat. If it's within the irrigation season, we would use an aquatic Roundup or aquatic glyphosate product.
But now this is not destroying anyone else. I mean, like birds.
No,
Okay.
no, they're all the herbicides we use are aquatically labeled and such. So focusing on partnerships, fundraising, focus on existing partners and new ones. Flat River Recovery and Information Program. They're a great partner for our weed management area. They give us $200,000 each year to help maintain and control the Fragmites here in the Central Platte area. Central Platte NRD, Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District, a lot of various entities assisting us along the way. Riparian vegetation management grants, we got $221,000 last year. We got some environmental trust fund grant also. So the partners have treated approximately 43,000 acres on the Platte River from 2008 to 2019. The river capacity has doubled in the past 15 years due to the work done today. Without annual efforts, or all of our gains could be lost within 2 or 3 years. Stable funding from a variety of sources is critical to continue our work. So the project needs to continue. We've got funding coming from various places. And so this leads us to the very bottom bullet point there. We got involved and started the Platte River Resilience Fund. And what it is, there's a lot of words on here, but basically what it is an endowment that was kind of a foresight or a thought a few years ago. And it's for Fragmites control in the Central Platte Valley here in our weed management area, basically. So it's an endowment. And so now we're going out for fundraising and doing a lot of fundraising, trying to get our goal eventually, years and years down the road, could be over $10 million. Currently, we have about $400,000 in this particular endowment with some good pledges made for the next 10 years from a few of the agencies. And so this endowment will eventually assist us on Fragmites and invasive species control on the Platte River here. Resilience Fund was established to develop a perpetual source of funds to ensure the Platte River will continue to thrive and support the thousands of people and species that depend on it. So our vision will be accomplished by growing the fund and using it to treat Fragmites and other invasive vegetation where needed, mechanically remove undesirable vegetation from the river channel as necessary, and maintain or increase the capacity of the river to move water. A portion of the income earned by the endowment may be used annually to support river conveyance projects and other emerging needs. Meanwhile, the principal remains and grows, providing a steady stream of financial resources for years to come. So that's just a great thing for the Platte River and the maintenance of the Platte River for generations to come. And it's just all about developing fundraising and pledge agreements and fundraising. That's what we're up to right now. And we've got it's on the Nebraska Community Foundation on their website. We can go online and make donations right on there if needed. Anybody is so willing to do so. I'll skim through these here pretty quick. I know we're going to get Todd up here and get talking, but a lot of counties are involved in the North American Invasive Species Management Association, kind of a national organization. Our mission is to support, promote, and empower invasive species prevention and management in North America. It's a network for all managers, supporters, and educators and interested individuals in invasive species management profession. So for over 26 years, NASMA has been supporting invasive species managers and growing programs that bridge the jurisdictional and geographic divides. So we have a conference every year, and the last couple of years it's been via Zoom. Next year, this year it was supposed to have been in Missoula, Montana, but it got canceled. Next year is going to be in Florida, and the following year in 2023 is going to be in Lincoln, Nebraska. So we're going to have this national conference here in Nebraska. And backing up a few years, in 2009, it was held here in Kearney, and we had some tour stops around the I think we even went out here to the ranch, moving crane trust building, and some airboat demonstrations. We had a helicopter demonstration at Rose Sanctuary. So yeah, we had a great conference, and that was in 2009. So we represent countries and a lot of states across the United States. So we have a lot of different programs within that organization, weed-free products. If you want to certify your hay to go to national parks, to take a bale of hay, take some of your hay with your horses, it has to be certified to get into there, so we can do that. We have educational outreach program called Play Clean Go. We have various webinars and professional development opportunities. National Invasive Species Awareness Week, that's towards the end of February. So a lot of different things going on within NASPA. So Play Clean Go and Marketing Outreach Committee, a lot of things. Weed-free forage, again. A little bit about the membership there. Skip through these here pretty quick. The staying members, a little bit on their website. Then there's the dates for our annual conference and trade show. And so, yeah, any questions for me before I step away?
When you spray this aquatic spray for Fragmites, what's it do to the other vegetation?
It does, both of the products that we use does take out other vegetation. And so, but the Fragmites is so aggressive, we've got to get rid of the Fragmites. Once we get rid of that, then some other vegetation can start coming back.
With so many plants and flowers that are available now in houses and commercial stores, is there any way of knowing whether any of those can become invasive? Or are they monitored or regulated?
Kim Todd with UNL Extension, I don't know if you see her on Backyard Farmer, but they've kind of been working on something to find out, okay, if this is invasive in your home, what else can you use? Or what's a native that's available? So they are working on it. I don't know of a specific publication out yet, but they are working on it. So I guess Rob kind of talked about the past, I'll take you to the future. So we'll see how this goes. I got a lot of pictures. Yeah, so there we go. Oops. Couldn't go the other way. Okay. So Nebraska's future noxious weeds. One thing that we're required to do every year is to look at all these other invasives and mark down how many acres that were defined of them, so we can see what is becoming an issue within Nebraska. And this weed list is based on ecoregions, so not every weed is in every ecoregions, but I did not break them up for this presentation. I'm just going to give you the list of the weeds. And so you mentioned Eastern Red Cedar. They realize now it is a problem. For years with the Nebraska Invasive Species Council, there were certain groups that didn't want to add Eastern Red Cedars to the list, but they realized, like especially in the sandhills, it is not native to the sandhills. So there should be some programs coming. They're trying to get some things going.
Isn't that where the controlled burns come in?
Yeah, controlled burns is one of them. It's a real easy one, and I know it's a lot more labor intensive, but boy, if you just cut below that bottom branch, they don't come back.
My dad always said, he grew up in Chippewa County.
Yeah.
When he was a kid, there were no cedars north of the Niobrara. Now they're all over.
Yeah, and part of that is, the government has a great thing. They want you to plant these tree grapes, and they do all these things, and then sometimes they come back and bite us. But they didn't know at the time it was a native tree. So, but now once they start putting out the berries and sending that out, they start growing everywhere. So. Oops. There we go. Okay, so the first one on the list is absinthe wormwood. This one, it can be very toxic to cattle. You know, it's a prolific seed producer. Each one of these flowers up here, they call them little yellow inconspicuous flowers. But that is one that in the last few years has really been showing up all over the state. When hay was brought in from South Dakota, a lot came in with that. But we even have it down here in southeast Nebraska. And it was areas like where the dam, where they brought in equipment to work on a dam, we ended up finding it on that. So it's spreading fast across the state. So this is one that we train the weed superintendents, educate them on. We try to help educate the landowners with even. So it's one that if you see, let your county weed superintendent know, maybe he can control it or she. Australian beard grass is another one. It's a tufted grass that is invasive and can become a weed issue. It tolerates drought conditions. So this year, you know, we're in a great year for it. The leaves have a turpentine-like odor. And I'll admit, one of my worst plants to identify is grasses. I don't spend near enough time with them. The other ones are a lot easier. So, you know, flowers, if they got a flower, you can identify most anything. And just like that, black knapweed. We have 2 knapweeds already on our noxious weed list. This is one that, as far as I know, we have not found yet, but it is on our border, and it is ready to come into Nebraska next chance it can get. But you can kind of see why they call it a black knapweed. It's got a real kind of almost black, yeah, there we go, where the, you know, seed pod is there. So it's one to look out for. If you see it, sure let us know. Calorie pear. Calorie pear in the last few years has been a big topic. I know South Carolina and them have been finding that it's really invasive there. I think in areas around like a ball field around Lincoln, it has started to spread out from there. So it's an invasive tree, and not only that, but it is a tree that it grows up in an egg shape and it gets strong wind. Those trees break really easy. So it can also be a danger within towns. So, and you know, that's an easy one to, I think everybody here knows a pear, but the thing about it is like your Bradford pears, after a while, different changing conditions can actually turn into a calorie pear. So it can become invasive there. You know, the calorie pear is like a real small pear. It's almost like a crab apple. Okay, camperweed. It's an herbaceous plant that is an annual, biennial, or short-lived perennial. Yeah, it sounds like it can do about everything, but this one is actually fairly new to the watch list weeds. You know, the list has gone over every year. Some of them are taken off if we don't end up finding them, if they've been on there for years. But this is a new one that is a species of concern. Common buckthorn, and we do have plenty of this here in Nebraska. The easiest way to tell is the berries. It likes to grow in understories, kind of shaded areas. The main problem with this is that it shades that ground below the tree canopy. So your native trees that shed their seed, that seed never has a chance to get sunlight to grow. So it's one I know we've got in Aurora. It's used as a border all the way around the house, but we are seeing it more and more out into the country as well. Common tansy. It's reported to be poisonous to livestock in large amounts, though it is seldom grazed due to the strong odor, displaces forage plants, reduces wildlife habitat, and species diversity. And that's one thing you'll notice throughout all these plants. It talks about how it harms the wildlife. You know, it doesn't give them the food that they need. So, common teasel. This is one of great concern. If you've gone through Lincoln and Omaha or through Missouri, you've seen it along the highways. It is all over the place. Bob Call from the Riparian in Lincoln, or he used to be with the Riparian in Lincoln. He warned us, he goes, this is going to be the next musk thistle. He goes, and it's harder to control. So You see this one, there are a couple chemicals that do work, but also a spade will also work to dig those out. Not only common, but there's also cutleaf teasel. And I kind of put this picture up here to show, but on that, the leaf there, maybe you'll work on that. It kind of forms a cup where that leaf is, and it will sit there and hold water. So, you know, after it's rained or dew, and it sit there, it has a steady water source for quite a while. A lot of seeds in that seed head as well. So, crown vetch, it's a native to Europe, Africa, and Asia. It is a member of the legume family, which also includes peas and beans. There are also native vetches out there, like milk vetch or hairy vetch. But the way you can tell the difference between them is that flower head right there. It looks kind of like a crown, so therefore the crown vetch. The other ones, I think I'm just took a picture on here. Yeah, here would be one of your native ones. So in that flower, just if anything, it'll put down a little row of flowers down the stem.
Is that on the watch list?
Yeah, no, not the native one, just the crown. I just threw that on there to confuse myself even, so. Dalmatian toadflax. Toadflax is a native to the Mediterranean region. It was originally introduced as an ornamental way back in the late 1800s. It escaped cultivation and has overtaken grasslands and pastures, rangeland, and natural areas in the West. I think we've had a little bit here in Nebraska. I think it is pretty well controlled, but we have seen it, been to a conference out in Utah. I mean, it's everywhere out there, so. This one, we do have another one that's just yellow toadflax, which is the shorter grown one. It's called butter and eggs, still sold as an ornamental, so. Flowering rush is a tall rush-like plant with long, narrow leaves and pinkish flowers. It is probably the only rush that puts off a flower, especially like this anyway. So it's easy to distinguish from other rushes, but it's become pretty well established, especially out in the western United States. And I know this is newly added. Well, I guess it's not newly added to the list, but there's here at the end of this deal is aquatic and submerged plants, and it's one that they're really concerned about. So we'll help them keep an eye out for that one, and if you see it, sure let us know. Garlic mustard. Some of these do have good value too. I mean, have you ever made like a little paste out of the garlic mustard? I mean, it's got good garlic flavor, but it also is another one that'll come in on the understories and shade out any native plant that has a chance to grow, because it comes up early, it's nice and tall and grows thick enough that it just outcompetes everything. Giant reed or Arundo Donax. We don't have much of this within the state. Most of them are in ornamental settings, just like Fragmites, but it's bigger brother, pretty much. It can be just as invasive, or just as invasive, maybe not quite as fast, but it definitely keeps moving.
What about pampas grass?
Pampas grass is still not considered an invasive, although it'll escape just like anything else. We have areas where we got a yard down by the Little Blue River, and it has crawled down the ditch and headed down towards the river. South of Milligan, Nebraska, where I live, there's one patch in a yard, but there's about 4 patches down the ditch now. So seeds.
It's a garbage.
Yeah, pretty much. I had a weed board member that swore the way he got rid of it is he mowed it over one time and just kept mowing it over. And he said it finally just gave up and went away. So that's one way to get rid of it if you don't want to dig it out or spray it. So. Henbane, also called black henbane. It's a coarse and poisonous Eurasian plant of the nightshade family. Sticky, hairy leaves and an unpleasant smell. I have not seen any of this. I don't know if they have any out west or north or anything. But honeysuckles. There are several honeysuckles that are invasives. There is a native honeysuckle also. But here are 3 of the invasives. You got the Tartarian honeysuckles, the one there in the middle. Morrow's honeysuckle is over there on the left. And the one on the right is the Amur honeysuckle. I think I got that right. Houndstongue is a very strong competitor of desirable forage and is poisonous. And Rob talked about that the weed management areas out west have been battling this plant a little bit. So they got on it early, and we're sitting in good shape. I've heard of some down in the river ground down around North Platte. But there is kind of a native one, kind of like too. Yeah, go ahead.
That picture on the right, the birds.
Yep. Yeah, and actually, I should have taken another one off the internet. It shows a cow almost completely covered in those birds. And I mean, dogs, when they take dogs hunting, just coats their fur. It's pretty, it's a sticky plant, and of course, that's how it gets moved around. So it's a real pretty flower. Medusa Head is one of the grasses that was added here in the last few years. Its detrimental impacts where it invades, including the alteration of the ecosystem. It can also be dangerous for cattle and wildlife. One of the other ones is a little worse that's coming up here, but you can see the seed head on that over here on the right. It almost looks like, wheat to a point. So it's like I say, grass is one of my worst ones where we don't have it in this area. I have not seen this one live in person yet. I'm hoping I never do. Yeah, and it's just like downy brome to cheatgrass. It dries out really fast and becomes a fire hazard as well. So, Oriental Bittersweet was introduced to the United States in the 1860s from East Asia. It's a woody deciduous plant, highly aggressive, used in a lot of ornamental stuff. Makes great pictures, beautiful plant. But you can kind of see there where it wraps around trees or branches and can end up either choking out the tree, or if it's a healthy enough plant, it can get too heavy for the tree and end up knocking it over as well. So, perennial sow thistle was a new one added. It can drastically reduce water resources and likely decreases native plant diversity, and is a problem in several crops, where it causes economic losses due to the reduced crop yields, increased expenses, and land depreciation. We do have another sow thistle called Spiny sow thistle, which is more prevalent in Nebraska. But this one, you can kind of see it almost has like a candle thistle seed head on it there, but yellow flower is kind of the giveaway. Queen Anne's lace, Billy. So this one, it's in the family of poison hemlock and giant hogweed, a wild carrot family. You can outcompete other plants. We've been finding a lot in road ditches. Actually, and I've got pasture that it's kind of an overgrazed pasture. It is starting to take over that pasture. And where we've come and sprayed in the ditch, it's actually, there was none in the ditch this year. So far it seems to be an easy plant to kill. If it becomes an issue, these are not enforced plants. These are just more for education and to see if it's going to be a problem. But yeah, so it can still be used. You're fine. So rip gut brome, another grass. And I wanted that picture on there so you can kind of see that at the end of those, and that, where that's blown up, it doesn't appear near as sharp as what it actually is. But that's the seed head there, and it can penetrate eyes and the mouth and the feet of animals and dogs. So, you talked about that needle grass there, but that has those long seed spines on it, just like a summer needle. Russian knapweed, another one that I do not know of here yet in Nebraska, but it spreads by the rhizomes and seeds, extremely aggressive. And kind of the way you can tell the difference between spotted and diffuse and all those is always at that seed head there. And this one kind of has more of a white and green as diffuse has more of the white, and then spotted has black spots, so. Sickleweed, native to Europe, the Mediterranean, and Central Asia. It's an invasive species in North America, especially of the Great Plains rangelands. I have not seen any of this yet. I think it's more out west, but you can see why it kind of got its name sickleweed. If you look at the leaf there, it's got teeth down that side, so looks just like a sickle. St. John's wort, another one that has health benefits, but also can be aggressive. It can also poison cattle, but they have to eat an extremely high amount. And then, so like even say you had one of those, what do they call them, albino deer? An albino deer ate this and then spent time out in the sun, could cause a sunburn. I mean, it makes them sensitive too. And same thing with cattle. So like your Charolais cattle, if they eat St. John's wort, they can get skin irritations, and that just from the sun, from the compounds that are within St. John's wort. So, and that one too, one of the neatest flowers I've ever seen. If you hold up a petal on that St. John's wort flower, it's got little holes all the way around that petal, and you can see the light through it. It's just a neat looking little flower. Sulfur cinquefoil has been showing up tons here in Nebraska, especially down in the southeast, hay meadows and everything else. But it's a perennial forb, and it has that sulfur yellow looking flower. The leaf is usually there's 5 leaves on per part there. I mean, it looks just like marijuana leaf. It's just a lot smaller and a lot more serrated. So. Another grass, Bentanada, it infests millions of acres in rangeland. However, this winter annual grass can also infest your crops and significantly impact the yield. And it is another one that causes sores within the animals' mouths when they eat it. A fire hazard. It's just a nasty grass, and hopefully we can keep it out of Nebraska. Chances are it'll end up here someday. Wild parsnip has been showing up more and more. You see it along the interstate right-of-ways going through Omaha. I've got it in CRP acres now in my county, and I've watched it spread. I can't enforce, it's got to be one that we just use education on, but I watched it overtake the CRP acres to the point that they finally called me this year, said we've got to do something. So working on spraying it. It's got real, like this time of year, it's in that leaf stage down there, the rosette stage. It's got a real fancy looking little leaf. Then it puts up and then it puts off, just almost like a dill. It's got that yellow flower. It's nice and round there. It's related to Queen Anne's lace too. So and they could cause a lot of skin irritation on humans and that. I did spend time in the patch this year. I've got itchy, but I didn't have the blisters that it sometimes show. Winter creeper, it's a highly invasive and damaging in the United States, causing the death of trees and forests in the urban areas. I know I've seen it for years on trees around here. I sometimes wonder if it doesn't get cold enough in Nebraska, but now with the changing weather, it's ripe for spreading. Yellow bedstraw, it's one that I think is only found in Cherry County so far in one of those playa wetlands. I know the Indians back in the day actually used to use that yellow flower to make a dye, but it can overtake those areas. It's unpalatable to cattle. It's just another plant that doesn't really serve a purpose besides maybe being a dye. So. Yellow blue stem, Kansas has really been battling this one. It's a warm season perennial grass. Looks an awful lot like our blue stems, except for this one will put off quite a few of those awns there, as where the regular blue stem is like usually 3 to 5. Yellow flag iris, beautiful plant, out there at agate fossil beds. People used to come for miles to come out and see that yellow flag iris there around where the Niobrara River starts. But it overtakes, it can cause skin irritations, it sickens livestock. And we are starting to see it more and more. Lincoln County has went and added it as a county added noxious weed because they had quite a bit coming down the canal and on the Platte River. And you can see, this is a picture from up at agate fossil beds there, or the way it just took over either side of the little channel of Niobrara there. These are the floating and submerged aquatic invasive plants that we don't usually do a lot of the inspections for. Me being a fisherman, I find what I think is some of them sometimes. But Nebraska Game and Parks has a new gentleman working there named Christopher Starr, and he's very good with his aquatic plants. So he has put out a list and wanted us to keep track of acre places that we find it. So we'll go through some of these. This first one's Brazilian Galodia. It's a submerged aquatic plant that can be rooted or free floating. This green plant has a bottle brush appearance and can grow 9 to 15 feet tall. Of course, the water would have to be that deep to get it that tall. Brittle naiad. Thick infestations of brittle naiad inhibit the growth of native aquatic plants and can make fishing and boating access difficult. And this one might change its position on the watch list. It's saying that it's already here now, but that might have been my fault. And when I was going fishing, I was catching this plant that had these spines on it. I was just for sure it's brittle naiad. Well, this Christopher Starr with Game and Parks finally corrected me. There is a native naiad in Nebraska as well, and it kind of has more of a red stem, but still has the thorns. Creeping water primrose, it grows aggressively, creating dense sprawling mats on the water surface. At shore, they crowd out native plants in the water bodies. Curly leaf pondweed can grow in dense stands, restricting the growth of native plants, depleting nutrients, and impacting water-based recreation. Eurasian water milfoil, it can infest an entire lake quickly. It provides poor habitat and low quality food source. Mats of vegetation provide good mosquito habitat. Out there at Lake out Nevada. Anyway, Tahoe, Lake Tahoe. So the inlet coming in there, it's like just a little river stream there. But we went and looked at that one day and it is just totally filled with Eurasian water milfoil. So they've been trying using black mats on top of it to shade it out and kill it that way instead of putting chemicals into the water. Giant salvinia, it's a free-floating plant that does not attach to the soil but remains buoyant on the surface of the body of water. Real neat looking plant. I don't know that I've ever seen it here in Nebraska. It's more of a southern weed, but as we warm up, we could very well see it. Hydrilla. Restrict water flow, resulting in flooding along rivers and canals. The canopies produce ideal breeding environments for mosquitoes. So can eventually affect public health as well. Parrot's feather, real neat looking plant. It's both submerged and emergent. You can see right up here where it's above the water. But yeah, it grows nice and thick and even like the fish have a hard time getting around in that stuff. Starry Stonewort grows in tall and dense colonies. It is known to form mats on the surface of the water that can interfere with recreation and potentially displace native plant species. And that flower right there is a neat looking little flower, but I imagine that's how it got its Starry Stonewort name. Water hyacinth, it's considered invasive throughout the world because it grows rapidly and can form thick layers over the water. As you can see there, and that's obviously down south somewhere, but it's definitely one that we needed. You know, it'd be easy to spot when we see the flower. So Water lettuce, it's a free floating plant with a rosette of leaves that resembles an open head of lettuce. They just found some in Nebraska down there just east of me in Saline County at Alexandria State Recreation Area. The NRD got a hold of Christopher Starr with the Game and Parks, and they were able to go in and remove, just hand remove every water lettuce that they had found. So hopefully they controlled it there, but it's another one that is starting to show up. So.
And how would that one end up here? Is that like possibly on a boat or?
No, more than likely somebody used it in like a home pond, or like even in your home aquariums too. A lot of these are actually escaped aquarium plants. And that's how they ended up here. So some of them like down on the Gulf and where they've washed ashore from other countries and start putting down, and then they eventually make their way north. But a lot of them are, you know, humans cause the problem. So. Yellow floating heart, it causes damage to aquatic environments by shading out native plants, decreasing the level of oxygen in water, and creating stagnant water habitat for mosquitoes. It is a very pretty flower. I don't know that I've ever seen it live anywhere. So that is the watch list, and we did learn something a long time ago. We sit there and we watch Fragmites for years. Like, okay, what's this grass showing up on the river? And then next thing you know, oh boy, we got to spend millions to control this now. So the point of the watch list is that we can get on these infestations early, get them taken care of, so we don't have to spend millions of dollars. Try to take care of them. So, you know, we try to keep an eye out for these things, but if you guys see any, sure let either Rob or I know. We can let the weed superintendent that county know.
I have a friend in Georgia with property and they call it kudzu.
Yep.
And it just covers the trees.
The vine that ate the south.
On the way to like Silver Creek on Highway 30, there's trees that are just covered. Would that be kudzu or would that be just like grapevines or whatever?
It would be wild cucumber, more likely. The wild cucumber's been showing up, you know, in the last few years. It's been just great growing conditions for it. Spread by birds, therefore it's going to grow on those trees because they'll sit there and, you know, the birds love that. It puts out little cucumbers. So they need it. We have one patch of kudzu in Nebraska and it hasn't moved. It's down there by Nebraska City on a railroad. The railroad used it as a bank stabilization, and they went in years ago and they rappelled down the deal and sprayed it all and got it all killed. Stayed away for about 5 years, but it has came back. But Nebraska so far is cold enough that it isn't moving, but Kansas is starting to see more and more in Kansas now. So, but so far, most of what we have, well, I shouldn't say all of it, I guess most of what we have is wild cucumber growing on those trees. Any other questions?
So NEB.org would be a place we could look if we wanted to identify.
Yeah, any weed will have the noxious weeds. It'll have your list of county weed superintendents. It also has the watch list on there. So yeah, you can get on there. Any invasives is the Nebraska Invasive Species Council site. So all these plants that are just on this presentation are on that. So
You can check our tree at the Stern
yeah,
Museum.
or check the tree at Stern Museum, you'll see the top one.
Earlier, was talking about the certifying haze in the parks. Do you have to certify it before you cut it?
Yes, it has to be 10 days, you know, guess a week before you cut it. Get a hold of the weed superintendent, they can come out and inspect it. If there is a troublesome weed, you have time to control it then before you cut it. And then, or if there's nothing, then you have, you know, 7 days. I know Mother Nature plays a part in there, but your weed superintendent will work with you on that. So it is, and that's one thing too, with the state road projects, they want clean hay to use for mulch on the sides of those roads. So the more weed-free hay we can get, and we have on our website, we have an area we can list it for sale. And I get calls from Oregon and Pennsylvania, people that are going to be traveling through wanting to find some hay. So.
Was it as expensive as it is?
Yeah. Well, no, actually, the certification is, most counties do it as a service. The only thing we charge for is the tags. There are a few counties that have a small fee with it, but Nebraska is one of the only states that barely charges to do certification. It's just kind of our duty, so.
All of those, some of those weeds that had all those berries on them that look so pretty. Have you heard of anybody making jelly out of some of this?
No,
I mean, some people make jelly out of anything, any kind of beets.
yeah, I love my choke cherry. I love all the jellies, but I've never heard of that, and I guess I didn't look up the edibility of any of those either. So that it might be something I do this winter just for curiosity.
I mean, they look so pretty and bright red, some of them. But I know Dave's got an aunt that she goes and makes jelly out of a lot of things.
Well, she needs a sampler. I know a guy. Any other questions?
Not to change the subject, but I was wondering about the cedar, red cedar tree, little blueberries.
Yep.
Do they have to pass through the element type of bird in order for them to grow?
I do not believe so, but I don't know the whole biology of that, I guess. From what I've seen, because I get it spread in the road ditches too, and there's obviously not, even if there's not a power line, we're getting it there. So sometimes I just think that those berries break down over time, but that might be, maybe it takes the, intestines or something to make it.
That's what we always heard.
Okay. Yeah, I had not heard of that yet, so. Any other questions for Rob or I, or other than that, thank you all for feeding me tonight.
Thank you very much.
I'm a food guy, so.